already, and I'm happy that I'm now shared by three illustrious people with different backgrounds. And yes, David, I was a little bit struck by your statement yesterday in your keynote that you almost got jailed just because you were doing a little conference on cryptography, one of the early ones.
Yes.
But how does it come together with the freedom of speech?
Well, yeah, that was back in '82 when I organized a conference on cryptography, the technology of secret codes, when the federal government said that they would put people in jail if they dared to do such a thing, because they had the idea that there should be no public research in cryptography, but rather that cryptography, like nuclear technology, is born classified. So even if you thought of something yourself, it could be classified, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to speak about it. Anyway, so yeah, I organized that conference to set cryptography free, and I think he's referring to recently, as in last week, the XX network launched a new free speech technology that I'm extremely excited about, and I didn't get a chance to mention in my presentation yesterday, but we call it, the name is Speak Easy. That's that's like a word in English. I believe that refers back to, cafes during the Prohibition period in the United States that apparently were so lively and successful that turned the tide and got the Prohibition reversed. So it went into alpha last week on Tuesday, and you can just use it. It has a lot of lessons learned from our previous current smartphone apps, the Elixir Messenger, which maybe you've heard of. This is based also on the XX network. But one of the things that we learned was that the app stores were starting to put various requirements on free speech apps, and that those were starting to become really unbearable for us. So this Elixir is not, this Speakeasy is not on app stores. It is what's called a progressive web app. It's something you can just go to that URL on any browser or on a smartphone. Currently, we don't have it formatted for smartphones in the alpha, so you can see it on a laptop or desktop computer. But this means we're free of all of those kind of constraints from the app stores and governments that impose related restrictions on us. So it is a platform that's, as far as I understand it, the first fully distributed social media. It's fully decentralized. There's absolutely no centralized mechanism whatsoever. It is something that runs on our XX network blockchain, which has about 350, 500 nodes that distribute the data and that shred the metadata. So if you're familiar with XX network, you know that it has the capability to do the mixing protocol, which I invented in '79, which essentially takes messages that every third of a second, it determines a new route for all those messages centering that third of a second. And they are sent through 5 nodes around the world, and each one of those nodes re-encrypts the messages and then randomizes their order and sends it on to the next 5 nodes. And so what that means is that no one, even if they can observe the whole network, can see who is sending messages to whom. So for Speakeasy, this is used to broadcast messages, to make posts. So the system prevents anyone from learning who is making which post. However, the users, if you try it out, you'll see that you're asked to choose a private key, public key pair that's mapped by an algorithm we created to a special fun name, and you can keep selecting from different sets until you find one that you like, and then that's a private key that was created locally on your machine and never leaves that machine, but the public key maps to this name, and that name is shown on the various, we call them speakeasies. They're essentially channels that you are on, as you can only be invited to a channel, but you can create as many channels as you like. And the only entity that can remove a user from a channel is the person who created the channel in the first place. There's no centralized way whatsoever to remove people. So, and you can speak freely because no one can see who you are, and so there's no surveillance capability, and it has it's an unprecedented free speech platform. So yeah, it's a big deal, and we are in the process of looking for ideas, and we have our own ideas and collaboration related to making it a bit more social, but currently it is a fully decentralized free speech platform, so pretty exciting.
Well, very interesting, and I take two buzzwords from it. The one is decentralization, and the other is free speech platform. But before I elaborate on that, I think you were reacting on the decentralized aspect.
Yeah, I just have a question, because I first of all applaud for this, because I think it's really very positive news that this platform is in alpha at the moment. But are you, if I look at the title of why we're sitting here, are you also measuring somehow whether it adds to the diversity in the discussions, whether it adds to the social cohesion? Is that something you look at, or you really look at it from only a technical perspective?
Well, my personal objective is social cohesion, and just like the name of the panel, if you look back at the YouTube record of my conference presentations over the last 6 months, or you'll see that I often refer to the fact that the World Economic Forum survey of participants recently listed social fragmentation as one of the top 10 concerns of attendees at World Economic Forum. Truth is, it never was on the list. In fact, it isn't even really a phrase, but 80% of planned attendees at the event listed it as like one of their biggest concerns, and it is a huge. That's basically what is destroying civilizations. That and global warming are the two biggest problems we have. So that's why I mentioned. I know maybe I used up a little too much time, but the fact that we are really endeavoring to create a little bit more of a social media than just these isolated channels. And the way we want to do it, thanks for the question, is such that it will bring people together as opposed to polarizing and fragmenting them. And so, like, for instance, and I think Bea asked this because she knows, I mentioned this last night, perhaps over dinner, but that one of the ways is by allowing posts to be promoted to a wider audience only after, let's say, more intensive review. So, speaking very generally, we have several schemes in mind for that, and in keeping with the theme of this conference, what we really want to do is inject voting into this. So if that's the kind of challenge and thing that interests you, please, let's try to work together to take this platform, which is unprecedented, basic stuff that we need, and it's working very efficiently, and to find ways and experiment with ways and build out ways to facilitate more interaction and the bringing together of people and the promoting of things that more people are interested in, and as opposed to sort of promoting the people that say the most obnoxious and loudest things.
Yeah.
Well, when I hear free speech app and everybody can speak out unharmed, and then you're controlling that before you give things out to the wider audience, it seems a little bit of a contradiction in there. And the other thing is, of course, Facebook went out to be, well, in its early days was a free speech app. Twitter is now, that Elon Musk says he wants to bring it back to be a free speech app. But this also was creating a lot of problems. We know that now these platforms, you mentioned it, are platforms for hate speech and stuff like that, and for polarizing more than than bringing people together.
Yeah.
So what do you think of David's idea? And I know you also are thinking in a similar direction.
Yeah, I think these are really good points, and so there's a few things to say about that. One, it does concern me that the people who are trying to create more social cohesion are almost all men who are creating these platforms. And it's just very clear when we're talking about diversity and we're talking about sort of the differences between the female-oriented world, which is much more about relationships, and the male-oriented world, which is a little bit more transactional, and the damage that's been done already. And I think that inclusion is incredibly important, but not just inclusion, but looking at best practices in these different communities. I think there's a lot to do around this, and I actually listened to a really interesting discussion last night with a group called Emergent Commons that had created, co-created their own social networks. It's on top of Mighty Networks, was a centralized thing, but they really talked a lot about how they evolved this idea of moderation. Voting isn't moderation, and I don't think anybody likes voting. I'm a democracy expert, and I think that one of the things that's been done to our great detriment is to use voting as if it's a good form of decision making. Voting is almost always a divisive form. It's like, oh, you're against, you're for, it doesn't work. But one of the things I wanted to suggest that could be really wonderful, and I know you're going to be familiar with this, is the slashdot form of moderation, which isn't exactly voting. And for those who aren't familiar with Slashdot, because maybe you don't have as many gray hairs as we do, and you're not as geeky as we are, it's still in existence. You can go at slashdot.org. But basically it was a news site, and they would publish some tech news, and people would discuss it. Now, if you were in good standing, which they called having good karma, every year or 6 months, you get like 2 weeks when it's your turn to moderate. And so that the moderation wasn't done by a group of moderators, but everybody got a turn as long as you weren't in bad standing. So if you were in good standing, you could be a moderator. And you didn't just moderate thumbs up, thumbs down, because in some ways, thumbs up, thumbs down, it is a voting mechanism. It means I agree or I disagree. It doesn't mean this is a quality statement or intelligent statement. It just means agree, disagree. So the moderation, every time you had a moderation, you could moderate. And like I said, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you know exactly how this worked. But you could say, insightful, funny, redundant, troll bait, or flame bait, troll. And so you had these different ways of indicating, and you could have other ones like scientifically proven or whatever. And so you would vote about the actual specific comment, not about the person, but about is that comment insightful, on topic, off topic, all those things. And then over time, you would generate karma. So if you said nasty things, like your votes, eventually when you would post, your post would be hidden from anybody except for people who wanted to see low-rated posts or posts from low-rated people. so that there was a filtering on top. And so you knew you were developing your reputation over time, but in some ways it wasn't like people were liking you or not liking you. They were liking what you said. And then the other thing about it was you can develop over time. Today, you could use AI on top of that and understand what people's expertise are. So for this person that has expertise in this area using a layer of natural language processing, and that could actually be the voting. So if you were looking for an expert in the area of AI or whatever else, you could say, okay, we can look at the last 18 months of posts. Who were the most insightful people? And if you added a layer on top of that of like thumbs up, thumbs down, agree, disagree, you might be able to say things like, this person is an expert, but they're very controversial. We want them on the panel, but we don't want them to be the head of state or something like that. So it's not exactly voting, it's much more nuanced, but it is a way of actually collecting the will of the people on top of social networking. So that's one aspect of what you're talking about the moderation. And I have some other aspects about that too, but I want to hear from you as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But Grace, been thinking about this for the last few years, so yeah, we got thanks
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
pointing those things out. Yeah.
Well, Bay, you are working in a little different world. You're not, well, you are building communities, but you're building up business communities, business ecosystems day by day in your little Deloitte lab. Let me put it this way. And so you have also an experience in building up these kind of platforms. And so when you hear this, what is your advice? Well, would you give? Would you agree, or would you go into a different direction? And also, I think business platforms and consumer platforms are not that far away from each other.
Okay. I think I'm not really in a position to give you an advice, to be honest, because I think you're way more knowledgeable than I am. And for me, to listen to this, it's really a valuable experience, because I think you used the word nerdy, so I'm allowed to use it as well now. Partially it's nerdy, but don't get me wrong, I fully understand what you're doing, and I think it's super important. That's why I applaud it, and I would love to join support and development. But in the world where I have to function, and I sit on a number of boards where we talk about making more money, the product market fit, these kinds of topics. I think, and building ecosystem, even, so I'm on this mission to get this technology more adopted. And to get this technology more adopted, I think one of the key things is that everybody needs to learn how to function in an ecosystem and understand how that works, understand what kind of roles are there, if you want to be in there, and all these things. And I think I'm hopeful that in due course the ecosystems will grow, and the interest of the people, the interest of our society will grow towards each other. But nowadays I see a lot of environments where I think the decisions are often very much driven by assessment of risk and risk management, and what kind of challenges do we see, and that drives the way forward, which is in some cases really unfortunately, but that's also, I think, that's my responsibility to bend things towards each other. But it's tough and a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to say the truth about that, which is that democracy and money don't mix. Democracy and social cohesion and money don't mix. And it's very obvious. It's like the GDP will rise if I send my children to daycare and my mother to a home instead of having my mother take care of my children. Yeah. And we need to say the truth. That system is bankrupt, it's dying, and we need to find a way around it. And if we're going to have a social networking system that has to be profitable, we will end up with the type of social dystopia we have now: higher rates of teen suicide, cutting, gender dystopia. All of these things are a result of these advertising models, and that's the truth. And we can't keep compromising. We have to stop compromising.
Well, I think you're opening up here a completely different field, and our business, our economy system is really a Ponzi scheme, and uh, we don't know how long it lasts. But I think it would be elaborating on that would be too much in this circle. I rather would like to mention something else, because I think we really have passed on a chance. Because when the social media came and we realized that there, it actually were two things we could see. The other thing was that suddenly people that I call like barroom circles, these opinions you heard in barrooms all the years along, only they just didn't have the capacity to speak out, so nobody heard them, but though they were speaking out more secretly. And suddenly they had a platform to speak up, and of course, they realized we are strong, and of course, because of how the algorithm worked, the impression that they were strong became even stronger, so they became even louder. And this, of course, is a problem. But on the other side, the thing that we had passed on is there was an opportunity to realize that there is a problem. And we could have reacted in a completely different way, not by limiting free speech, by throwing people, by throwing out messages or posts. I think we just approached this problem completely the wrong way. And that's something I think we definitely need to work on. We have to correct. But of course, as always, doing something after a problem arose and wasn't handled properly is it's much more difficult than tackling it from the beginning.
Maybe. I mean, everything has consequences, right? Knowing what the consequences are and being like, okay, now you're going to design something new based on knowing that didn't work or that worked this way. I think when we're in a social group, and particularly in corporations, I'm sure you see this, people make sure to implement procedures to hear the quiet people, because sometimes they're smart and they just can't be bothered competing with that jerk who's talking too loud. And you can do that maybe in a room. It's everybody's turn to talk. You have a facilitator, and he's like, okay, your turn to talk. Because I'm usually the loudest person in the room. And in social media, what you're talking, again, we have such great AI. I mean, we can have things that might say, if you see somebody typing faster than they're normal, it might say, do you need to take a break? Are you emotionally, maybe you just step away from your computer before you say that, right? You could actually program in, this might be a more persuasive way to say it, which means like you take out all the curse words and the anger, right? Like this might be more persuasive if you'd like to convince the other side. Or you could even program in something like, if the back and forth is going really fast and heated and there's more than 5 back and forths, it's like, you now are in a video chat with the person. And you can't, because apparently you're talking about something too complex for that. There are ways to do this. I don't know, what are your thoughts about these types of mechanisms? How difficult are those to create?
I thought those are really interesting ideas, Grace said. I haven't thought about them very deeply, but it is my instinct that that is the way things will go and must go, because these mechanisms, machine learning or whatever you want to call them, are not only becoming much more effective and powerful and less expensive, but somehow the public is being trained to sort of defer to them a little more, and they're very well suited for this sort of thing. I mean, I think, if you use a typical word processor, text editor, whatever you want to call it, you're already used to a lot of suggestions and, this sort of thing, and it's all kinds of interfaces. UX, there's more and more where the platform knows better somehow, or so I think that's definitely the way it's going to go, and there's a lot of potential there for really improving things. Yeah, I mean, and as you point out, a lot of this stuff is so well known from earlier generations, like corporate meeting technology, and that there was a lot done for trying to automate in an actual conference room, and things like that. So these are well studied things, but these new media offer much richer set of possibilities that I think people will automatically sort of accept. So I think it's really can really help. I mean, if there's an incentive to do it that way.
But maybe to add to the discussion a little bit, because I think we talk about decentralization, social cohesion, diversity. So, okay, from my perspective, and so let's say I'm on the corporate side at the moment, yeah? I think social cohesion is definitely very much on their agenda. Diversity is very much on the agenda, although I must say this is the first time that I'm on a platform for the topic of diversity. They have asked me 1,000,000 times. I'm always kind of hesitant on this topic, but anyway. Yeah. But the topic of decentralization, sharing things, it's a really difficult one. That is not on the agenda. The ossification of the systems, the existing systems, is so strong that it's really difficult to get a change. And I would not mind getting your advice on how to get things moving.
Go ahead.
I mean, decentralization is it's like a little bit of a global world, right? And it's kind of funny to be like, oh, we're going to talk about cohesion and decentralization. It's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
But I think that as we think about decentralizations, I think natural systems are very useful to look at. Like, my body's decentralized. We used to think like all of the thinking is in the brain, even though we would say things like, I have a gut feeling. Yeah. Well, is your gut thinking right now? We all now, and today we know with modern science, it is. Your gut is thinking, and there is a heartfelt thing, not just your brain.
I never thought of it that way. Thank you. Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah. And so if you look...
So I can use myself as an example.
Yeah, and we're all very familiar. Like, if you look at the body, like that diagram of the skeleton, and the diagram of the circulatory system, and the diagram of the respiratory system or the reproductive system, they're overlaid on one another. They work in interaction. There's not one that's more important than the other. It's not like, oh, let's vote for heart or lungs today. It's like, oh, that's not how it works. If we start to think about natural systems as a decentralized way of self-organization and regulatory systems, right? My temperature doesn't go below or above a certain temperature. So that's a regulatory system. I think that's a kind of way of thinking about that. I don't know how you think about that.
Well, I think it's also related to, the conflict between capitalism and other values. So I think that's probably why, in the corporate setting, it's not that immediately extremely well received. But yeah, there's...
Well, they don't feel the urgency as we do. I think that's mainly that. If they would feel the similar urgency, I'm sure things would move.
So, I mean, one thing I could say is that, I think the public is very rapidly coming to the strongly held conclusion that decentralization is the way things need to be, and they're almost demanding it, expecting it in the short term, so that is something that, of course, business has to be very sensitive to those kind of trends and, what people want. And these are strong feelings that I don't think people are easily, talked out of. I mean, the more you try to talk them out of it, probably the more strongly they feel about it. So, yeah, I think that that's probably the thing that's going to tip it over.
Yeah.
Well, the decentralization, I still don't know if it really will solve problems or not. And you mentioned earlier that you're not sure about it either because you say it's a modern technology and we don't know what's going to happen. And my additional point is I want to throw into this round is that when the internet arose, we all were very optimistic that what positive and great things it would do to our society and how free and open we would be. And look at the internet today and what an instrument of control in part it has become. And even we are not fully unharmed from this trend. So my fear is that at some point the same thing will happen, that the decentralization will be instrumentalized in one way or the other to follow up. Well, okay, you don't like the idea, and I really want to know what you have to say.
Well, I mean, decentralization is somehow inherently not something that can be dominated by central interests, right? So I think it has half a hope of not being compromised the way, the way the public thinks of the internet, right? As we call it Web 2, the way this was able to be sort of, covertly, clandestinely colonized and captured and used to exploit people. I think that's why there is the reaction. That's what is, people want to get away from that. And decentralization is believed to be the sort of antithesis of that. So I think that's, I don't think it's a problem. Except to the extent that some people may, not be that optimistic or hopeful, or think that it really won't be different. But it is, I think, fundamentally by design, not suited for that kind of exploitation, and that's why people want it. So I think we're in good shape.
I think there's a tension also between centralization and decentralization. I mean, one reason centralization works is you got a whole bunch of people getting together, pushing in the same direction. And so we always have an instinct of like, I want to be independent, I want to have free speech, I want to do my independent thing, but then that comes at the cost of where we as a group are making a demand of the system, or we as a group are standing up to this surveillance system. And I think that's a very difficult balance to meet, is how do you have this independent free speech thing, but also have the demands met? And I feel like this has been one of my biggest problems. And it was interesting listening, Balaji was talking about this on the longest podcast ever, which was 8 hours. So most of you may have not gotten to this section, but I'm super interested in the network state, so I listened to the whole 8 hours with Lex Friedman. But he said, look, there's this, what centralization has done is creates directionality. And if you look at Twitter, it's all noise. So if I have a movement that I want to start, and I've got a lot of people who like me, like maybe all of you even want to support me, right? But I want to say, okay, can everybody tweet this at the same day, at the same time? There really aren't good tools for that. And I feel like the whole decentralization movement, right? We're here at this conference to kind of get a clue of what's happening, because there's no, like, how do I know I'm even a member of it? And if I'm a member, how do I know what the thing is that we should push for this week as a movement in the regulatory environment? And so then you've got this, whatever happened this week, but like you've got some rich guy going and lobbying Congress on behalf of the blockchain because we don't have a way of mobilizing as a group. And so that tension really speaks to me when I'm thinking about this new freedom and decentralization. It's like, okay, but then how do we actually have directionality in terms of what we want? How do we actually do anything that is building something if we're all a whole bunch of individuals like that? I feel that tension is really important to point out, and not that I have a solution, but it's important to say, okay, if everything gets decentralized, how do you even know that we're moving in a particular direction? We probably aren't.
It's interesting because it really connects with my research, even though my research is more corporately focused. One of the things I learned from all my data collection is that there are different levels of decentralization that you like to have at different moments in time. And you need to be aware where you are and what you would like to have as a group, which is, of course, a very difficult question, and it's very difficult to decide and discuss. But but you have to understand that it's status. It's a different. It can have different forms. And I have not fully concluded on the topic yet, but I learned that there are different status. Yeah. So there's not just one order.
Yeah, I don't want to be too persistent, but I think voting, however hard-edged it may be one of those forms that in a certain situation can allow a decentralized group to at least kind of move in a direction where there's some consensus.
Well, I agree. It can be part. It can be part of the mix together with so that, because at some point you have to come to decisions. I'm sure. So that's basically what you do in a DAO, and only that way a DAO can work. So this sure is part of it. But we talked about social media now very extensively. Is this one of the key futures to key technologies and platforms to open up our societies again into a more compromise-willing platform, and how can this be accomplished?
I think of communications as one of the most important parts of governance. And the reason that we have representative democracy and voting systems is because, like, okay, well, I could send I can send one to Madrid, and he'll come back. He's from my town. We know him. He's okay. We send him to Madrid. He does his thing. He comes back. He reports to us. And that was all the communication technology we had. So we created representative democracy. And now we've created social media and other forms of news, and I think it creates a completely different concept of what consensus can mean and what democracy can mean. And that's why I'm thinking that voting isn't something you do every now and again, but by indicating your opinion over time on different things, and it completely changes what kinds of mechanisms we can have, the level of participation that we can have, and what our government might be able to do for us, or what the fact that we are part of the government in every act that we take. And so I think it's absolutely a fundamental building block of democracy.
Okay, one last short statement, one word. Are you optimistic about the future of our societies, and will blockchain save us?
I am, yes, thanks. Yeah, I think we're at a very critical juncture, and obviously there are ways things could go wrong, but I think I can see a real way through, and it just takes an example or two of something that works really well to sort of promulgate the meme that, we, the people, are sort of really in control of the whole situation, in fact, and we can start to feel that power, and it'll pull us together. And I think we have all kinds of technology that can, be brought to bear.
This was a very long one word.
Yeah.
So, great.
Gravity. I like gravity. Happiness is striving for something and achieving towards it. So we won't run out of problems and accomplishments that we can make as humanity. So I'm optimistic.
So this was a shorter one word, and now even shorter.
Of course, the answer is yes. I think we have an obligation to everybody and yourself to say yes. I think no is not an option here.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this panel, and we're delivering something. And yeah,
Thanks.
thank you for all.